Well, good morning, everyone. It is great to see everybody here this morning. And we are going to be finishing up a sermon series on generosity. And, you know, one of my favorite things to say after a sermon, and let me just tell you, this congregation is so sweet to me, and as always, you know, people tell me all the time, man, that was a great sermon. And then if you tell me that, typically I will say, we'll see. We'll see if it was a great sermon. We'll see if it changes lives. We'll see how we act this week as opposed to last week, because, I mean, as entertaining as my sermons might be, that's not what they're for. They're for change and to get the Word of God into our hearts, to make us different, to encourage us, to spur us on to transformation. And so this sermon series on generosity, we have a very real metric on whether or not it's a good sermon series or not, and that's our budget. So we'll see if this has been a worthwhile endeavor, because there's real outcome to this. One of the things I want to start off with saying as we wrap this up is I so appreciate Jeremy's his devotion for our communion this morning, talking about excellence in everything we do, and and there's so much that we do, and we try to do it with excellence and do the best we can, and it is important to think about, are we working for God? The Bible is replete with examples of saying, do everything as though you're working for God, not working for man. And when he said that, there were a couple of passages that came to mind. And so this part right here, you might think, oh, this is the introduction to a sermon. No, this is for free, and the rest of it's coming in a minute. But there's a couple of verses that stand out to me. Both of them in the Old Testament. They're all minor prophets. One of them is in Haggai, and one of them is in Malachi. The one in Malachi, and this comes with speaking excellence over us, and what we, do we really do things for God with excellence? Do we value what we do because of our relationship with God, or within our relationship with God, like we do everything else in our life? In Malachi, he's talking about that, and this goes with what Paul said, or what Luke said, that Paul said about what Jesus said, that God loves a cheerful giver. And in Malachi, he challenges the people, and he says, look, you guys bring contempt to the altar, to the Lord's table. And they're like, well, how do we do that? And he said, because you talk about your service to God like it's a burden to you. Like you think, oh, what do we got to, I've got to do this, or I've got to do that. You talk about how much you're going to give, and the generosity with which you're going to live, and the perfection of the sacrifice that you bring. But when it really comes down to it, when it all boils down to what you're actually going to do, you're bringing in these sick and tired animals instead of the perfect and the best of your flock. Because, it's super easy. I mean, it's real easy to say what we're going to do for the kingdom. And it's real easy to make big plans for all of the service and all of the generosity and all of the good that we're going to do. But there comes a point when we have got to put a pen to paper and write that check. And give that animal, give that portion of what God has given us. And when it comes down to it, are we holding up our end of the bargain and doing what God has called us to do? Because He's called us to give our best to Him, because, like Jeremy said, that's how He's treated us. He has treated us with the absolute very best, and it's not good enough for us to say, oh, I'm going to do this or I'm going to do that. What are we actually, when the rubber meets the road, what are we actually doing? And another thing that I like to pick on us for, and look, I'm as guilty as anybody. Honestly, I'm as guilty as anybody in this room or anybody in this world, because what Haggai challenges with is like, look, God comes and He says, he looks at His people and He's like, hey, that's a nice house you built for yourself. Why don't we look over there at the temple that you're going to build? And the temple's sitting in ruins. And God says, I see that you have, you have built you yourself live in paneled houses while my house sits in ruin. You know, we can come up with all kinds of excuses for that too. One of my favorite is, well, it's just not God's will. Have you ever noticed that when we're doing something, we make a plan, we've got a big project or whatever, and when hard times come, when obstacles, get there, we say, well, it's just, I guess it wasn't God's will. But it's kind of funny how, when it's our house, when it's my bank account, I can overcome all kinds of obstacles. All of a sudden, God's will is on my side, even though there's mountains of opposition. I can overcome that for my house. I can overcome that for what I'm trying to accomplish. I can overcome that for my kingdom. But when it comes to the kingdom of the Lord, we're real quick to make excuses and talk about how hard this must be and how God must want us to do so. Well, and his house sits in ruin. So I want to challenge us to be open and honest and transparent with all of our intentions, with all of our successes when it comes to generosity, and all of the areas that God is calling us to transform. And so this morning, as we look at the empty tomb and we remember the promise that God has made to us, and we anticipate the shared experience of our own resurrection, I want to talk about the life that we live in living a legacy. All of us want something of our life to continue after this mortal portion of it is over. All of us want to be remembered in some way, and one of the things that we can do in order to be remembered is invest in the kingdom. The fact of the matter is, and I said this weeks ago, is that at some point, everything you own right now will be owned by someone else. Everything that you have at this moment is going to belong to someone else at some point, because we're not going to be able to hold on to it forever. And if we want to be remembered, if we want this life to mean something beyond our last breath, then there is an investment in the kingdom that has to be made, or else everything turns to nothing. And as we've read in Psalm 112, 1 through 10, the psalmist tells us, look, there are difficult times, but the righteous do not fear those things. And he's not talking about because we're going to have, all this savings, we save for a rainy day, and when the rain comes, we've got plenty of money. What he's talking about is that we have this eternal perspective on everything. And we have to live our life as though it is going to be remembered. We have to live our life as though it is going to count way beyond our material possessions, way beyond our accumulations. And that is the perspective that we have, is that I'm part of something. I'm invested in something that's so much bigger than myself, that regardless of the good times or the bad times, I'm going to remain. The question is, are we truly invested in that? Are we honestly, authentically invested in something that's going to last beyond us? You see, because a generous life leaves a spiritual legacy that outlives us. And generosity is one of the, it's not like, the most important thing. I believe it's honestly like one of the only things that is a gauge as to how invested in this relationship with God that we are. Because generosity is one of those things that it either is or it isn't. My mother used to tell me all the time that, being honest is, honesty is a lot like pregnancy. Either you are or you're not. You're never just sort of pregnant. I mean, either you are or you're not. And generosity is one of those things where, either you are or you're not. It either shows up or it doesn't. It's either something that you do or it's not, and it's so measurable. It isn't something that you can fake. It isn't something because you can say, "Hey, I'm generous and I'm going to bless others," but there comes a point when, all right, let's see it. The others, they're going to know whether or not blessings are coming to them through you. And a generous life, it leaves this legacy that outlives us. We are spoken of and remembered through generosity. The first thing that I want to, the first point that I want to make is generous people leave a spiritual impact. If you look at Proverbs 11 and 25, he says, "A generous person will prosper. Whoever refreshes others will be refreshed." The point that Scripture is making, whether it's in Psalm 112 or in Proverbs 11:25, is like, there is a point to all of this. God is, and I've said this before, God is looking for conduits of His grace. He is looking for those who can be a medium between He and the suffering that's going on, the lack that exists in this world. And when He finds those people and they are willing to allow that to flow through them, then what He says is, "I'm going to give you more." Not that and the refreshing here isn't our comfort. It's refreshing the stores with which we give out to others and around us in need. And whether it's Proverbs, I'm hitting the wrong button, that's why. Whether it's Proverbs 11 or Hebrews 13, he says, "Do not forget to do good and to share with others. For with such sacrifices, God is pleased." One of the things that is important for us to understand is when he says in Hebrews, don't forget to do good. In my heart, I believe he's being so sarcastic here. Have you ever asked your kid to do something before you get home from work or where you're going out? Hey, clean the kitchen, mow the grass, take out the trash. And you come home and it's not done. And one of my favorite excuses for why this wasn't done, and my boy Scott over here is laughing and nodding. He already knows the answer to this. You say, "Why is this?" "Oh, I forgot. Oh, I forgot." You had one thing to do all day long, and I forgot. I forgot is probably the worst excuse ever because it's a giant lie. We didn't forget. Maybe we got distracted. Maybe we got, sidetracked, whatever. But we didn't forget. We just didn't do it. And I believe that he's saying, don't forget to do good. You don't forget. You see somebody in need. Oh, man, I forgot they were in need. No, they're starving in front of you. What do you mean you forgot? I think he's being sarcastic and saying, don't forget to do good and to share with others. And the other thing I love about this, he says, for such sacrifices, God is pleased. One of my biggest pet peeves is generosity that's not really all that generous. I just, things that are for show, I do it. Don't get me wrong, I do it. But I hate it in me as much as I hate it in others. What are you talking about, Shane? I'm talking about this. I'm talking about I'm willing to give things that I don't want anymore. You ever notice that? I was at a church and we were doing this this kingdom investment thing. We did it was this campaign thing. Where part of it was sowing a seed, and the elders of the church they had on the Sunday of this sermon. They brought a stack of $100 bills. And so we were saying the whole premise of it was if you're willing to, and it was all about Matthew 25, which we're going to get to that in a minute, where the elders were giving out $100 to anybody who would take it and then invest that in some kingdom ministry and so the whole goal was to see, we did a 6-month thing, and how big that $100 could grow for the kingdom. And then the other side of that was you don't have to take the $100, but the challenge was to go home and to find something that you could sacrifice. And we had this big auction in town. It was a small town, so we had this big auction. We advertised it and all that. And so all of the things that were brought were auctioned off for Honduras ministries. What was brought in was fascinating to me. You could not count the number of golf clubs that were donated. And if you any golfers here? Do we have any golfers? No, we have zero. A couple golfers. Oh, okay, a couple golfers. Yeah. To the golfers, how many sets of Callaway irons do you think we had donated? How many sets of Titleist? Now, if you're not a golfer, these are good brands. You know what we got a lot of? Tour Edge. You know what we got a lot of? Kirkland. You know, we got a lot of I had these in my attic, and I thought, well, that's a great opportunity to get rid of it. I mean, they didn't say that, but that was how it worked out. That's what it meant. And nobody's laughing at that because we're all guilty of it. Because you know what we're willing to give? You know what we're willing to be generous with? The stuff we don't want anymore. The stuff that's been sitting around. You know, that old sick lamb. You know, that one goat that's limping, you know. Probably not going to make it much longer. We'll give that. But, I mean, are we sacrificing? My challenge has always been, does my generosity change my standard of living? I mean, that's a question for all of us. Does the amount of generosity, does my tithe, does my giving change my standard of living at all? Or is it just kind of the leftovers of after I've done everything I want to do or given to all the things that I want to that are for me, and then I'm generous out of the leftovers? You see, one of the things that we're trying to do, let's see, is that, no, I want to get to, okay. So we're trying to leave a lasting refuge. We're just going to speak of this ministry here. And, and don't get me wrong, I struggle with how many ministries there are and all of the opportunities we have to give to churches. I mean, let's face it, you cannot swing a sack of dead possums in this town without hitting a church. I mean, honestly, we've got so much real estate, money in real estate tied up in the kingdom. I struggle with that. I'll be honest with you. But what we're trying to do here is, we built this big, beautiful, where's Scotty, new building. If you weren't here last week, Scotty called our building old. Well, to him it is. But those of us who were here back in the 2000s when we, built this and elders were cutting down trees with the golden chainsaw, that was scary. But this building represents it's a refuge for people who are in spiritual need. And what we're trying to do, and there are a ton of ministries that are run out of here. We do a lot of things, whether it's the preschool or the homeless ministry or Joy in Haiti or whatever it is. There are plenty of ministries that happen, but this building is a huge expense just to be a refuge for people. And when we get this place paid off, we own it. The kingdom owns it, and nothing can ever happen to it, and it will always be here as a monument to a place where you can come and receive spiritual hospitality. You can come and you can receive spiritual support. When you are hurting, this place is a beacon to the lost of our community. And what we're trying to do is financially secure it so it never goes, so years from now you don't come by here and it's a drive-in movie theater. What we're trying, that's one very real financial reality that we're trying to secure. And I'll be honest with you, that has a lot to do with the motivations of this whole sermon series, is how can we as a people become so generous that we pay this place off and then fund so many more ministries? Do you know what we could do? Do you know what we could do with if the house payment we made each month went straight to a ministry? Do you know how many more people we could reach in third world countries? Do you know how many people we could reach within a square mile of this place if we could just spend that money on ministry and not a mortgage? I'm just saying. I mean, it's a very, very real thing. And maybe the generation that's sitting here today, maybe we're not the dream a dream generation where we say, you know what this this community needs? Another building. But way back in the, 50s or 60s when this church was founded, that when all this was just cornfields and none of it was, there was no, Super Walmart or Home Depots or Golden Corrals, when it was just fields, and they said, we need a church in this community. And so that generation started it and built it. And then it outgrew its old building that was landlocked by the Baptist church and the KFC. And then we built this place. Maybe we're the generation that makes it to where the deed is secured, the mortgage is paid, and this monument to God's kingdom, this refuge for lost and dying souls will always be here. Maybe that's our goal. Maybe that's our campaign. That we decide we're going to get absolutely, as Dave Ramsey would say, mad dog mean at the debt and get it paid so we can move on to bigger and more ministerial things. This is a very real need. And it's going to take very real generosity to meet that need. The second thing I want is not only is it about a lasting legacy, but stewardship is faithfulness. When it comes to being stewards of what God has given us, we need to understand that is our faithfulness. And in Matthew 25:14-30, we hear the story of the rich guy who was leaving, the landowner who was going away, and so he leaves with his servants 3 different amounts of prosperity or blessings or money. And one takes the money and invests it and doubles it. The other one takes the money, he gets less, but he takes it and he also doubles it. So let's say one's got $100 and he takes it, invests it, and he comes back, he's got $200 when the landowner comes home. The second one he gives $50 to, and when he comes back, the guy who had 50 has turned it into 100. And then the one guy he gives 10, and that guy, he says, you know what? My master is he's a cruel guy. He's a miser. He's a penny pincher. You know what he does? He harvests on the edges of his property where he doesn't even sow. And he counts every dollar is important to him. And man, I don't want to get in trouble, so I'm going to take this $10 and I'm going to hold on to it. And then when he comes back, I won't have lost anything, and I'll give it back to him. And that's exactly what happens. And you know what that master says? When the guy with $10 who put it in his pocket and held on to it gives him his 10, he says, here's your $10 back. He says, you lazy, wicked servant. You knew I harvest where I don't even plow. You knew that every dollar is accounted for, and I'm strict about it. Why wouldn't you at least put it on deposit at the bank so I get even a very minimal interest? You lazy, wicked servant. Now, that messes with me. The fact that he called, I can understand lazy. I mean, I believe me, if anybody understands lazy, I understand lazy. I am lazy. I've got 6 kids. I know what lazy looks like. But wicked. wicked. And so I've prayed about it. I've wondered, God, how can you call me wicked? You see, God's calling us to put our blessings into the kingdom economy. He's calling on us to take what we have and to put it into the economy so that it is multiplied, and that whatever the economy does, the economy can do to the blessings that we have. But if we just hold on to it, we are saying that the rest of the world does not deserve what I have. I can't think of a better definition of wicked. I can't think of a better definition of wicked, because that person, when you go and you read, and I encourage you to read that. I've done a pretty decent job of giving you the Reader's Digest version of it. But go and read that in Matthew 25, 14 through 30. You know what that last servant was all about? You know what he was worried about? Same thing we're worried about ourselves. You know, Vic and I were watching this show on Netflix, Little House on the Prairie. And they've redone that, because apparently every story in the world has already been told, and so you got to remake everything now. Well, I would encourage you to watch it if you've got Netflix. It's cute. But there's a fever that goes through the whole area, goes through the prairie. And there's a drug or a tonic or something that they needed. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but quinine or something. Is that it, quinine? Okay. They needed quinine for that. And I don't know if that's a real medicine or it's just some snake oil stuff they had in the 1800s. I don't know. But, I mean, because growing up in Calhoun County, Alabama, I took a lot of that kind of stuff. It's like my great-grandma, oh, yeah, drink this. Okay. Then you spend the next 3 days throwing up everything in the world, and then you feel better. It's like, see, it cured you. It's like, well, maybe. So they needed this quinine. And so, the doctor, he's riding his little horse to all the places. He's looking at the general store and whatever, trying to find it. Well, he finds out that this really rich people on the prairie, they had ordered some, and they had a stockpile of this. So he shows up at their door, and he's like, I really need this. And she's like, oh, no, I can't give you that. He's like, well, but, people need this medicine to get better. And she said, well, what if my family gets sick? What if I don't have any for me? And that is the embodiment of wickedness, that all I care about is how am I going to get along. And I believe with all of my heart that when God hears this person say in Matthew chapter 25 that here it is, I held on to what you gave me, and I'm giving exactly that back because I did not want to get in trouble. He's saying, you are worried about yourself, you wicked, lazy servant. When we are only concerned with our own provision, with our own comfort, with our own family or our own, and I hear that so much. I mean, we can take anything good and we can weaponize it against the kingdom, because I hear so many times, that, well, I'm doing this for my family, or it's all about family time, or da-da-da-da-da. What's more important than family? God. I'm going to say that one more time because I really feel like we need to hear that. You know what is more important than your relationship with your family? Your relationship with your God. And if I lead my family anywhere, it's going to be to God. If I leave anything for my family, it better be a legacy of faith and kingdom citizenship, because everything else is meaningless. You wicked and lazy servant. In 1 Peter chapter 4 and 10, we're told each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. Do we think about our physical, material possessions as as one of the various forms of God's grace? Each of you should use whatever gifts you've received. You see, what he's trying to teach us is that we're managers. We're not owners. We are given the responsibility to manage what we what we have control over, what is in our possession, what is over our purview. We don't own it. We manage it. I work for a roofing company, as y'all know, during the week. In my job, I manage the warranty department. So what I get is mad people all day long calling me. And so by the end of the week, I'm a little grumpy because I've been yelled at all week and called various and sundry names and all that, because every one of us in here knows that every single major project you do at your house is supposed to go perfectly without a hiccup. And then everything's supposed to last forever without breaking or without causing you any kind of a heartache. Well, unfortunately, that's not the world we live in. And so I have people calling me all day wanting me to fix stuff. And my job is to protect the customer experience, but also to protect the company's bottom line. It just is what it is. I can't just give away the store. And I can't, just because Edwin calls me and says, hey, you know what, this is what's going on, I can't just say, all right, well, we're going to come do everything over again. We're going to give you a whole brand new roof all over again. No, we got to figure out, I got to manage this to where the company funds last as long as possible. I've got to invest that and do that in a way that makes sense for the company. We have to do the same. The difference is that God is calling us to give more and more. He's calling us to give away the store. When it comes to our kingdom that we are managing, God's not calling us to have so much stockpile in arrears. He's calling us to live hand to mouth. He's calling us to give as much of it away as we possibly can, trusting that more is going to come from Him. We don't own this. We simply manage it. And legacy is built one decision at a time. When we think about generosity, when we think about the legacy that we are leaving, it is truly one decision at a time. In Galatians 6 and 9, let us not grow weary of doing good. Again, what a challenge. You know what he's saying? Don't get tired. How about this language? Don't get sick of doing the right thing. If we wrote this scripture today, don't get sick and tired of doing the right thing. For at the proper time we'll reap a harvest if we do not give up. I don't know what that harvest is. I don't know if he's talking about heaven or if he's talking about right now. Because if we continue to give, if we continue to be generous, if we continue to do good, you know what we're going to continue to need? A harvest of more economy to do good with. You see, it's all this cycle, it's all this flow that God is calling us to be a part of. He isn't just asking us to do one thing and to move on. He's asking us to have a culture of generosity so that we can live in a culture of receiving and allowing that to flow through us. Don't grow weary. Don't get sick of it. Don't get tired of doing the right thing. And in Hebrews 6 in verse 10, it says, God's not unjust. He's not going to forget your work and the love that you've shown Him as you've helped His people and continue to help them. You see, He's saying it's not just one decision that we make. It's not just one episode of life. It is the way that we live. It's as we continue to help Him. I love the wording here. He's like, God's not going to forget your work and the love that you have shown who? The love you've shown Him. Don't forget, other parts of Matthew chapter 5, he talks about all the good that we do. He's saying, I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was hungry, you gave me something to eat. I was alone, I was in prison, I was down on my luck, and you came and you did this for me. Oh Lord, when? When did we see you hungry? When did we see you alone or in prison? When did we do all these things for you? And he says, anytime you do it to the least person among you, the most helpless, the most unable to pay you back. Any time that you've done it to them, that's doing it directly to me. God is saying, I'm not unjust. I see the love that you have for me as it is poured out to your fellow man, and you continue to help them. Last thing I want to say is, we are all sitting in the shade of trees that we did not plant. We are all reaping the benefits, the spiritual benefits, the financial benefits, everything of our life that we experience. We are sitting in the shade of trees that we didn't plant. I mean, think about planting a tree. I want to, I would love to put a tire swing on a tree for Dez to come over to my house and swing on. Well, if I planted it now, it's a little too late, because maybe his kids will be able to swing on a tire swing in a tree that I plant now. But think about planting a tree. It takes time for that to grow. It takes time for all of this to come to fruition. The question is, will there be any shade for future generations? What are we doing? As we sit here in this building, generationally mixed. I mean, we have those of our number who have been a part of building ministries and faithful legacies. We have others who have just come along and joined that. What trees are we planting that future generations will be able to sit in the shade of? What ministries are we willing to support, and what sacrifices are we willing to make now that we might not ever feel the benefits of? But we are so full of faith, so driven by our love for God, that we are willing to be generous now, knowing that we will never see the fruition of that gift, of that generosity. But we trust God to bless it and allow it to grow to bless generations to come. The sermon is yours. The sermon series is yours. The opportunity belongs to all of us. Will we be a radically generous people? Can we live our lives in such a way that not only are we the gossip of town? Like, can you believe what that little church over there is doing? Can you believe? You know what? We were able to do this because of that. There was families fed because this place exists. Will we bless the community? Will we be generous enough to bless the community now? And can we be generous enough to bless generations that haven't been born yet? Will you join me as together we stand and as we sing?